By 1950, many Eastern European countries were satellites of the Soviet Union. In Western Europe, Russian agents organized communist strikes and riots that threatened to bring down several democratic governments. In Indochina, we were spending $500 million a year to finance the French war against the Reds. And in Saigon, our military mission was teaching South Vietnamese militia how to fire U.S. weapons. When World War II ended in 1945, Russia and America began a Cold War of ideology. But by 1950, many of us wondered if the U.S. could contain international communism without a shooting war. The answer came in June.
Korea is a small country, thousands of miles away. But what is happening there is important to every American. On Sunday, June 25th, Communist forces attacked the Republic of Korea. Free nations must be on their guard, more than ever before, against this kind of sneak attack.
Within hours of the invasion, President Truman ordered supplies rushed to Korea, and our World War II planes and ships prepared for war. Two days later, the United Nations Security Council authorized member nations to send troops to stop the North Koreans. For the first time in history, a world organization voted to create an armed force to stop armed force. Russia was absent from the balloting. Without consulting Congress, the President backed the UN resolution with planes, ships, tanks, guns, men and women. America was at war again. The first months were terrible for the UN. For 6 weeks, there was only bloody, humiliating defeat. Casualties ran as high as 50%. Even higher among the homeless and starving. 2 months after the fighting began, the UN armies had retreated as far as they could go. There was fear that if the war continued, our troops would be driven into the sea. A defense perimeter was finally built around the port of Pusan. Supplies began to pour in from the States and Japan, and fresh UN troops from Britain, France, Australia, Holland, and the Philippines. With his men still trapped in Pusan, General MacArthur, commander of the UN forces, launched a brilliant and daring invasion. MacArthur landed waves of U.S. Marines at Incheon, 150 miles behind the enemy lines, and attacked the North Koreans from the rear. The Communist Army was practically destroyed. Half were prisoners. The rest ran like hell for home. South Koreans, even suspected of collaborating with the Reds during the occupation, were executed by vigilantes along the road. But many refugees, fed, clothed, and nursed by UN troops, were able to return home for the first time since the war began. As the communists retreated, the UN forces swept north to the Yalu River, separating North Korea from Chinese Manchuria. General MacArthur announced to the world that the war was very shortly coming to an end. He was wrong. On Thanksgiving 1950, 300,000 Chinese troops hit the United Nations lines. The Chinese pushed right through North Korea and into South Korea. Casualties were staggering as the UN again retreated south. Finally, in July of 1953, after Eisenhower threatened to use atomic weapons in North Korea, an armistice was signed, and the survivors came home. The fighting had lasted 3 years. Nearly 54,000 Americans were killed. More than 2 million Chinese, North and South Koreans were also dead. Most of them civilians. Korea remained divided at the 38th parallel. But the war was finally over.